Şu hadi Elden Ring incelemesi de bir inceleyeyim bakayım ya. İzleyeyim bakayım. Spoilersız diyor arkadaş. Totem yapıp izlemeyelim. Dur bir izleyeyim bakayım işte. Adam deyince canım çekti. Maragım kabardı. Arkadaşlar Elden Ring'in spoilersız inceleme videosunu izliyorum. Haberiniz olsun. İzle abi, spoiler yok. Okey, açayım bakayım, hayırlısı ya. Hadi Allah utandırmasın, go. Altta boğuluyuz biraz abi, kusura bakma. Yok, alıştık artık. Burada olmanız yeter. Aradakine sohbet açın ama. Ya inceleme şu yüzden izlemek istiyorum bir de. Şu ana kadar hep yani incelemelerden önceki her şey şeyin izin verdiği kadardı. İmzalayıp kullanıyordu ya millet. Şimdi incelemelerde her şeyi gösterirler genelde.
By some of the toughest boss encounters From Software has ever conceived. A lot of anger, especially at these assholes. Ooh, I hate these guys. And exhilaration from finally getting through that battle that I had been stuck on for an hour. But more than anything else, I was in near constant awe from the many absolutely jaw-dropping vistas, by the sheer scope of an absolutely enormous world, by the frequently harrowing enemies, and by the way in which Elden Ring nearly always found a way to reward my curiosity with either an interesting encounter, a valuable reward, or something even greater. From Software takes the ball that The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild got rolling and runs with it.
Allah'ım sana şükürler olsun. Bir incelemede duymak istediğim, örneğini görmek istediğim oyun her zaman Breath of the Wild'dır ya. Çok sevindim.
Creating a fascinating and dense open world about freedom and exploration above all else, while also somehow managing to seamlessly weave a full-on Dark Souls game into the middle of it. It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that Elden Ring ended up as one of the most unforgettable gaming experiences I've ever had.
Ses iyi mi arkadaşlar bu arada?
To set the stage, all you know from the outset is that you play as a tarnished of no renown, blessed by grace, and are compelled to make the journey to the lands between and become an Elden Lord. What that actually means, how one might go about doing that, and what the deal is with that giant glowing golden tree are all things that you have to discover for yourself. Like other FromSoft games, the grand story is hard to fully digest on a first playthrough, but it's a story that I nonetheless enjoyed trying to piece together for myself. It ended up being the organic side stories that kept me most enthralled rather than the grand overarching plot that credits Game of Thrones' George R.R. Martin as its scenario writer. FromSoft.
Çok ilginç. Ana senaryodan ziyade dünyada gezerken bulduğum yan hikayeler beni daha çok enterese etti diyor. Ki bunlar güzel söylemler.
Smartly doesn't change much in its approach to these from the Souls games, Bloodborne, or Sekiro. You'll just naturally meet characters as you explore and discover the world and become involved in their problems. There are no exclamation point markers on the map, no waypoints to guide you to them, their problems.
Oy haritaya bakın. Sandığımdan daha dikey. Sis oralar. Deniz değil. Vay babayın kemiği. Vay. Ne olmuş orada ya?
There are no exclamation point markers on the map, no waypoints to guide you to them. And these characters don't always flag you down or initially want or need anything from you. They're just people with their own agendas and goals, whose stories are impacted based on your own actions or inactions. That was actually kind of refreshing in an open world as vast as this one. And it was always exciting to see a familiar face pop up again later, as I was eager to learn about what brought them to this new part of the world and how their journey had progressed. The trade-off, of course, is that without any markers, quest log, or journal, it becomes very easy to forget about certain plot threads and accidentally leave them unresolved by the end. That's a bummer, and I've already felt regret about missing out on stories that some of my colleagues have had, but for me it was worth it, because even after 87 hours, I never once felt the open world fatigue that usually sets in when my brain gets overloaded by a map absolutely full of unresolved side quest markers. Besides, any missed quests give me extra incentive to continue onto New Game Plus. Freedom is the word that every aspect of Elden Ring's design connects back to.
Oh, özgürlük diyor herif ha. Demek ki bütün macera boyunca yanımızda gezip
Arthur, asıl var ya sen de bir kebap yemeye gideceğiz. Her şey mükemmel olacak Arthur.
falan diyen bir tane gerizekalının uşaklığını etmiyoruz 40 saat boyunca demek ki. İyi bari, sevindim buna.
Limgrave, the first of many interconnected regions of the lands between, you are completely free to go wherever you want. And sure, that's far from a new concept in an open world game, but the way it's handled here is truly extraordinary. If you wanted to, you can be an explorer and spend hours upon hours in just Limgrave, delving into every mini dungeon, fighting every boss, discovering every NPC, and leveling yourself up to better prepare for what's next. Alternatively, you could follow the Light of Grace, guiding you toward the main path and the first major dungeon. Or you could find a hidden path to a new region that's meant for higher levels and completely bypass the first major dungeon entirely. Maybe even steal yourself a cool weapon early while you're there. Again, this is not unprecedented.
Aa, helal. Yani ana dungeon, o bir tane kale vardı ya, diğer oyunlarda görmüşsünüzdür. Adam diyor ki isterseniz haritayı yeterince gezerek gizli rotalar keşfedip dungeon'ı tümüyle es geçebilirsiniz diyor. İşte açık dünya, işte bir şey.
But a few things set Elden Ring apart from games like Skyrim that provide a similar openness. For one, Elden Ring doesn't scale enemy levels to your own at all, so jumping into a later region means you're always dealing with stronger enemies.
Allah razı olsun, level scaling yokmuş. Odyssey'de ben o level scaling'den nefret etmiştim ya. Yani zor araziye gidersen ağzını kırıyorlar, level scaling yok diyor. Güçlenince de fakir arazisine döversen muhtemelen başta dövemediğin herkesi aslan gibi dövüyorsun. Barış, oh Elden Ring demiş, sağ olsun.
Making the risk-reward prospect of doing so very real. But perhaps more notably, the way its different areas are connected makes finding these new ones more than a simple matter of choosing a direction and heading towards it. Limgrave is designed very specifically with a main path in mind that takes you through Stormvale Castle, and finding a way around that feels like you've truly discovered a hidden passage or alternate route, which is a super cool feeling not present in most open world games I've explored. You also have more freedom in how you approach combat than any previous FromSoft game, thanks to a bunch of familiar new systems that are used in interesting ways here. You can crouch walk and use stealth to avoid detection, or more easily sneak up for a backstab. You can fight on horseback, you can craft items on the
Ay
fly,
ben stealth
you can
oynayacağım
summon
oyunu
a
herhalde
huge
ya.
variety of creatures to fight for you, and most substantially,
bilmiyorum.
you can equip Ashes of War to your weapons and completely change their affinity and skill. The most important element of Elden Ring's philosophy, though, is the freedom to just walk away and do something else when you hit a wall. Elden Ring is hard, which is to be expected from a FromSoft game, but its difficulty surprised me, even as a veteran of the Souls-like genre. I hit multiple points, even all the way up to the moment I reached the very last boss, where I had unlocked paths to several bosses and simply could not make headway on any of them. But even though I hit dead ends on those paths, there was always somewhere else I can go.
Adam diyor ben diyor gedikli Souls oyuncusuyum diyor. Bunun zorluğu beni bile şaşırttı diyor. Ha, yine IGN incelemesi. Yani ne kadar adam gedikli Souls oyuncusudur, ne kadar zorlanmıştır onu bilemem şimdi tabii ki. Yani incelemeyi yapan arkadaşa bir şey demiyorum ama IGN incelemede biraz
a region I hadn't thoroughly explored, an NPC quest that I had set aside for later, a Light of Grace indicator that I had not yet followed. There was never a point in Elden Ring where I was at a complete loss of what to do, and every time I explored those other regions and followed those alternate paths, I would find new gear and items, level up my stats, or learn new spells or skills that would eventually give me the extra edge I needed to power through a boss that had given me problems. It isn't just the promise of making my numbers go up that called me to turn over every stone on the map. The Lands Between is positively brimming with riches, intrigue, and danger at every turn. Much of what Elden Ring's open world does well can be traced directly back to things that made Breath of the Wild stand out from the many open world games that came before it. It's that same feeling of starting out in a world with little explicit guidance, finding something that piques your curiosity on your own, doing whatever it takes to get there, and then being rewarded for that curiosity. The big difference is that in Breath of the Wild, I could usually predict what's going to happen when I get to that orange glowy thing off in the distance. I'll do a puzzle, unearth a shrine, do another puzzle, and probably get a cool temporary weapon and spirit orb. That's not to take anything away from Breath of the Wild, it was awesome, but that pattern became somewhat routine by the end. In Elden Ring, by contrast, very rarely did my predictions ever come true. I'd head to a lake and all of a sudden get ambushed by a dragon. Follow a river expecting to collect some minor crafting materials, only to find a dungeon filled with enemies and traps. Enter a cave and get jumped by little goblin men. Or take a seemingly unimposing elevator and find that it just keeps going down further and further and further until, well, you'll have to get there yourself to find out. Best of all, each of these little excursions rewards your curiosity with something worthwhile. That could be a new weapon, a new Ash of War, a valuable consumable,
Ay
a new
bravo
creature
ya.
for you to
Ne zaman bir şey merak edip peşine takılsanız sonunda illa bir şey çıkıyor diyor. Küslük yaşadığım sevgilim Red Dead Redemption'dan bahsetmek istiyorum burada ama Red Dead Redemption'da şey beni çok üzüyordu. Kendini kaptırıyorsun, açık dünyaya vuruyorsun, gidiyorsun bir yere. Bakıyorsun orada bir şey var falan. %50 ihtimal oradan ilginç bir şey çıkıyor. Altın çıkıyor, silah çıkıyor, bir şey çıkıyor. %50 ihtimal çok ilginç yapılmış bir kısım var. Hiçbir şey çıkmıyor oradan. Çünkü daha sonra story de gelinecek oraya. Yani ya Bounty Hunt'ta gelinecek ya kamptan Lenny ile geleceğiz filan, anladınız mı? Böyle mesela şey filan beni çok üzmüştü böyle. Ben açık dünyasında çok gezmiştim Red Dead Redemption'ın Dutch'tan sıkılıp. Diyorum mekana bak ya, nereler var ya filan diyorum. Bomboş mesela. Sonra kamp değiştikten sonra orası böyle ana görev merkezi falan gibi bir şey haline geliyor. Ama o noktaya kadar böyle normalde çatışarak aldığımız için devasa çeteler bulduğumuz mekanlar bomboş duruyordu. Bence yani ana hikaye oraya gelmeden önce de oralarda bir şeyler olmaya devam edebilirdi ama Red Dead bunu atlamıştı ya. Elden Ring bunu yapmadıysa yani Kardom sen buraya ana hikayeyle geleceksin. Şimdi buraya gelme çekmiyorsa ne güzel. Breath of the Wild da öyleydi işte. Bir yere ne zaman gidersen git oranın olacak olayı oluyordu yani.
summon, a new spell, or a new NPC to talk to. There are so many valuable rewards available that I never felt disappointed by my prize, regardless of the amount of effort it took. But the thing that's most impressive about Elden Ring is that in between all of this brilliant open world design, there are a handful of legacy dungeons that still deliver those wide linear levels that Souls fans have come to expect. These are gigantic castles, forts, manors, underground labyrinths, and more that are packed with secret areas, challenging bosses, and multiple paths that are linked by one-way shortcut doors. If they were all strung together without being tied to an open world, they could probably exist on their own as Dark Souls 4. Bottom line, Elden Ring's open world exploration is a new benchmark. It's constantly exciting, rewarding, and full of moments that made me go holy shit in a host of different ways. As far as combat goes, Elden Ring is certainly closest to Dark Souls 3 when compared to other games in From Software's library of action RPGs characterized by weighty attacks, careful stamina management, and a bit of a slower pace than games like Bloodborne and Sekiro. The two big new additions are the ability to use a guard counter by blocking an attack with your shield and then immediately pressing the strong attack button to follow up with a crushing strike that can leave weaker enemies in a crumpled state, and a jump attack that gives melee wielders a new type of heavy attack that can also be used to stun enemies and leave them open for a critical hit. They're both great additions that offer melee classes fun new tools, but for the most part, From Software has certainly adopted a if it ain't broke, don't fix it approach. What really makes the combat in Elden Ring so good, though, is its enemy design and variety. Not only are a fair number of them horrifying, but some of these baddies are absolutely vicious, coming at you with wild swings and combos that seemingly go on forever and can hit from 10 feet away. Yeah, like that. And he's still going. Others are more methodical and hide behind their shields to wait for the right opportunity to either parry you or catch you while you're winding up. Others still are weak, but can be huge threats when they ambush you with a grab that kills you in one hit. Many are designed to punish those who just mash the dodge roll button without care, which makes Elden Ring a very hard game. But it's a good style of difficulty. One that's less about fast reaction speeds and twitch reflexes, though those certainly help, and more about learning, adapting, and finding the planted weaknesses in enemy attack patterns. Deciphering those tells and acting upon each moment of opportunity is a large part of why these games are so much fun. And then there are the bosses. I don't want to spoil them, but there are a handful that are some of the most visually and mechanically impressive From Software has ever crafted.
Vallahi eğer anlattıkları gibiyse ki bu IGN anlattıkları gibiyse gerçekten şey ya. Yani Breath of the Wild Nintendo Switch eksklusif olduğu için Breath of the Wild oynamayan çok fazla insan var. Dark Souls meşhur olduğu için Dark Souls'un mekanikleri yüzünden Dark Souls'a hayran bir sürü insan da var. Böyle Souls hayranları ve casual kitleye çok daha karanlık bir Breath of the Wild sunacaklar. Yani Breath of the Wild'ın yaptığının %80'ini yapmış olsalar milletin götü düşer bu oyunda. Breath of the Wild kaçınız oynadı bilmiyorum. Ama gerçekten yani şöyle söyleyeyim. Breath of the Wild oynadıktan sonra açık dünya oyunlarından beklenti o kadar yükseliyor ki. İşte mesela Red Dead Redemption eleştirirken utanmaz hale geliyorsun çünkü böyle oluyorsun. Yani güzel de falan gibi oluyorsun. Yani e, Breath of the Wild harbiden bir şey yani insanın oyunlarla ilgili eleştiri yaparken radarında bulunması gereken oyunlardan. Dedikleri gibi gerçekten bu kadar fazla konsolda ve mecrada aynı anda çıkıp Breath of the Wild oynamamış insanlara Breath of the Wild'ın becerdiği bazı şeyleri becererek %80'ini becerse yeter diyorum bu arada. Yani zaten bir de Souls evreni. Milletin götü düşer buna. Düşer valla. Breath of the Wild hani oynamayan arkadaşlar o yüzden hep şey oluyor. Mesela ben onu çok görüyorum yani. Bazı oyunları gömerken sağlam gömüyoruz. Millet diyor ki niye gömüyorsunuz? Emek var abi emek falan diyor. İnsan şey oluyor böyle. Ulan Breath of the Wild'da verilen de emek. Yani o da emek. O çok iyi. Bu emek o kadar iyi değil. Demek ki var bir fark yani. Elden Ring galiba yani IGN'in anlattığı gibiyse ama hani IGN'e ne kadar güveneceğiz bilmiyorum. Öte yandan %90'larda review'lar düşmüş. Bakalım. Akgöt Karagöt yarın belli olacak. Yani her şeyden önce Elden Ring yani Breath of the Wild'ın tadına bakmamış tayfaya Breath of the Wild vereceği zaman işler değişir. Ee, Breath of the Wild bu arada ilk çıktığında bir Zelda oyunu olarak Dark Souls'dan çok fazla esinlendiğini Nintendo'cular çok söylemişti. Yani şaka maka Breath of the Wild gerçekten dünyanın en iyi oyunlar arasında kabul ediliyor. Ya benim de hani dünyanın en iyi oyunlarını say deseler top 5'e ben de Breath of the Wild'ı koyarım. Pek çok inceleme eleştiri sitesinde dünyanın en iyi oyunu olarak Breath of the Wild'ı görürsünüz bugün hala. Ee, O yüzden Breath of the Wild'ı Breath of the Wild yapan Nintendo'nun ve Zelda'nın tasarım ekibinin Dark Souls'dan bazı şeyleri öğrenip Breath of the Wild'a eklemesiydi. Şimdi de Dark Souls'cular Dark Souls'dan ilham almış Breath of the Wild'a bakıp oradan Elden Ring'i türetmişler. Buralarda böyle salak salak o çakmışlar falan muhabbeti yapan olur ama hep diyorum ya bir fikri alırsın ama önemli olan o fikri alıp doğrudan koymak değil. Onun üstüne bir şey katıp kendi yeni o şeyini çıkarabilmek. Bence buralardan izlediğim kadarıyla anladım. Elden Ring bence bunu başarmış. Bunu doğru şekilde başardıysa size söyleyeyim milletin gerçekten götü düşecek muhtemelen. Baya baya yani.
It is no exaggeration to say that Elden Ring is From Software's largest and most ambitious game yet, and that ambition has more than paid off. Even after 87 hours of blood, sweat, and tears that included some of the most challenging fights I've ever fought, and innumerable surprises, there are still bosses that I left on the table, secrets that I've yet to uncover, side quests that I missed out on, tons of weapons, spells, and skills I've never used. And this is all on top of PvP and cooperative play that I've barely been able to scratch the surface of. Throughout it all, while the fundamentals of combat haven't changed much from what we've seen before, the enormous variety of viciously designed enemies and the brutal but surmountable bosses have brought its battles to a new level. Even with all the threads I didn't manage to tug on my first playthrough, of which I'm sure there will be several, what I was treated to can easily be held among the best open world games I've ever played. Like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild before it, Elden Ring is one that we'll be looking back to as a game that moved the genre forward. For more Elden Ring, make sure to check out the first minutes of the game. And for everything else, keep it here on IGN.
Umutlandık bakalım. Umutlandık bakalım. Tom is a person olmasın da.
Yeah, I think I love this game. Elden Ring is a masterpiece. There's just no other word for it. Even a 10 out of 10 doesn't feel like it does this game justice. As someone who was incredibly excited leading up to its release, this game has somehow surpassed all of my expectations. I have not been this thoroughly engrossed in a game in years. Not only are the environments jaw-droppingly beautiful, not only does to have some of the best combat and level design From Software has ever created, it also packages all of that in an impossibly large world. I'm sitting here with over 60 hours in the game, and the end is still not in sight. If I had to guess, I'm probably at least 75%, maybe 80% of the way through. However, you never know with FromSoft. Also, keep in mind, I personally have a lot of experience with the genre, and if you're familiar with me at all, you'll know that I'm pretty good at these games. I'm saying that not to brag, but to say that those 60 hours are very likely closer to at least 80 for the average player, and I wouldn't be surprised if it took some people over 100 hours to do everything in this game. And that's not even touching the online stuff, which will increase that number significantly. So let's talk about it. Why is Elden Ring good? Why does it work? And quick note before we get into anything, this video will only contain footage from the first 2 regions of the game, and I'll do my best to not spoil anything major. If you've seen footage from the network tests and a couple trailers here and there, you should probably be fine watching this video. I really do want everyone to experience the sheer joy and wonder of the big and small surprises in this game, and I know how special the first playthrough of a FromSoft title can be. I won't be going into any great detail for the topics in this video, so consider this just the broad strokes of what to expect and why I like this game so much. First off, I want to make sure we're all on the same page. This is a Souls game. It 100% has all of Dark Souls DNA, but cranked up to 11 and placed in a truly open world. And if you're somehow watching this video without knowing what the Souls series is, they're the series of games by developer From Software and quite simply some of the best action RPGs ever. And Elden Ring has somehow surpassed them. It's simply the best. The only reason you wouldn't want to play this is that you can't unplay it, and attempting to go back to other games that attempt similar things will be difficult. Even if you've somehow bounced off of earlier FromSoft games in the past, I'd strongly encourage you to still give this a shot, and I'll talk more about that later. For now, let's move on and talk about the world, map, and structure of Elden Ring. The environments of this world are consistently some of the most beautiful and stunning that I've seen in gaming as a whole. From the way the light pokes through trees as you're riding your horse, to how fog rolls across.
Tamam ya. Yeter ya. Yeter, fakiriz işte, tamam. Oynayamıyoruz, yeter. Öyle bir konuştu ki dayanamadım, verdim deluxe versiyon ön siparişini. Hayatımda ilk defa bir oyuna 64 pound veriyorum. İnşallah değer. Ama bak, yani dediğim, yani şimdi bak, her oyuncu her oyunu sevecek diye bir şey yok. Yani inşallah seversin. Yani şeyi unutmamak lazım. Mesela Red Dead Redemption 2 iyi bir oyun mu? Müthiş bir oyun. Eleştirilecek yerleri var mı? Bence var. O yüzden hani her çok iyi oyunu herkes çok sevecek diye bir şey yok. Yani şimdi Elden Ring ile alakalı da aynı durum var. Çok tersine gitmez inşallah. Daha önce Souls oyunu oynamış mıydınız hocam bilmiyorum da. Oynayınız yani. Ya da biraz izleyiniz yani. O pre-order edenlere The Ring Gesture'ı geliyormuş. Hadi bakalım.